We all grew up hearing about the American dream, where you work hard, you play by the rules, and you'll eventually end up with a house, a stable job, maybe even a family, and some sense of security. That was the promise. But somewhere along the way, in the past few decades, that dream has started to slip. And while I don't think it's entirely gone, it is not what it used to be. And if you're young like me right now, it probably doesn't feel like that dream is as attainable, if not completely unattainable now. It feels like a joke. Because when you look at your bank account, when you look at the price of your rent, your groceries, when you look at how much a house costs compared to what your actual income is, it's hard not to wonder, was this dream ever real? Or was it just a narrative to keep the masses happy? Just enough hope to think that it was possible, but not enough to actually achieve it. After World War II, the dream did look very real. For our grandparents, for the baby boomer generation, they were able to buy homes in their 20s. My grandmother had 3 kids and a house by the time she was 23, 24, with a single income. You didn't need to have 2 people working. They could just work in a factory or even an office job. My grandfather was a professor at a university. But even with that, you didn't need to have a fancy job. And you had health benefits and pensions. That doesn't really exist like it used to now. And particularly, they were not drowning in debt before they even started their life. There wasn't this idea that you just had to get $120,000 worth of college debt just to get started in life. I want to make sure that I use a little bit more specific statistics in this talk, not just general philosophizing. So let's talk about home prices. The average house in the 70s cost around $65,000 in today's money. And then you compare that to today, where the median house in the US is around $420,000. And when it comes to income and wages, yeah, it hasn't exactly 7x'd in the same way that home prices have. Productivity has gone up, GDPs have gone up for countries, companies make a lot more money, but the average worker's pay has certainly not kept up, and that should not be surprising at all. And that's the thing, wages have been stagnant like this for decades. Maybe stagnant isn't the right word, but they have not kept up, that is for sure. When you adjust for inflation, we're actually making kind of a similar amount of money that our parents were making. I know that my mom told me that when she was a waitress in college, putting herself through a university, she was making about $10 an hour. My first job when I was a teenager was also for $10 an hour. It has not moved at all. It hadn't budged one bit, and maybe it's a little bit higher now versus, 6-7 years ago when I was first starting to work. But bro, the fact that it doesn't go up at all, it's still $10 an hour 30 years later, is insane. Real productive wages that can buy you a home and afford you a lifestyle that your grandparents or parents had has been kind of the same for the last 50, 60 years. While the cost of housing, education, healthcare, food, literally everything has gone up. It's not that people are not working hard. If anything, we're working more hours today. My girlfriend probably works from 7:30 to 5:30 every single day. As I film this video, I'm filming it on a Sunday. I work pretty much 7 days a week on YouTube. It is not a lack of hours or a lack of trying. It's that the math simply doesn't add up anymore. We were told to work hard as kids, but that doesn't buy the freedom that it used to. And meanwhile, wealth inequality has stretched into something like a Frankenstein's monster. It's ridiculous. The top 1% of Americans hold around a third of the nation's wealth. And I'm talking about America here. 1/3 of all wealth is owned by 1% of people. Let that sink in for a second. And while the bottom half, tens of millions of people, control just about 2.5%. Half the country is fighting over crumbs, while a tiny sliver of billionaires and multimillionaires own like continents worth of money. Many of the top 1% or 0.1% of Americans own more money and wealth than entire countries or the entire GDP of some places in the world. I am a believer in capitalism the way that it started out, but it makes it pretty damn hard to not think, maybe one person shouldn't own more wealth than entire regions of the world, like several countries put together. It's not a particularly radical or socialist or communist idea to say that. I think that you should be rewarded for working hard and earn money, but if one person is more powerful than entire governments, then I think something went wrong in that process. And it's not even about whether or not things are fair. I'm not here to debate whether or not life is fair, because it is not fair. But the point is that it's just demoralizing for your average person. And especially for Gen Z, like me, I'm 23. We all feel like the starting line is so farther back than it was for our parents and grandparents. Wealth inequality and the ability to build a life for yourself wasn't as much of a concern when the wage that you earned could actually afford you a reasonable lifestyle. But that's no longer true. And so it's incredibly demoralizing for any young person starting out today. It makes every dollar that you earn feel smaller. Like when you get your paycheck, it's like, yeah, it's nice to get paid, but it's not going to go as far as it used to. And you're competing in a game where it feels hard to not believe that it was rigged from the start. The average Gen Z student debt holder carries about $23,000 of debt. And then millennials have about $40,000 of debt on average. And let that sink in. That's a lot of money, okay? You're talking several $100s, $400, $500, $600 a month just to your student debt payments. And then you've got rent, where that could easily eat half of your paycheck if you're in a city. I recently was living in an apartment that was about $3,400 per month in rent. And if I did not have both my day job and YouTube at the time, just my day job, that reflected about 75% of my income, that rent right there. So even if you land a good job where, I had a fairly cushy, you could say, office job, and you could say, oh, well, you're living the dream, you got a remote office job, you can still be absolutely floundering. I wasn't particularly floundering because, again, I had my day job and YouTube, and now I do YouTube full-time. But if I was only operating with one job, as most people are, and as most people should, you shouldn't have to work 2 or 3 jobs, then you're kind of screwed. People throw around the idea of living paycheck to paycheck, and I think it's often dramatized where people are not truly living paycheck to paycheck, where once you pay your groceries, your rent, your insurance, and your student debt payments, that you're truly left with nothing. I think more people than not, there's a non-zero amount of people that do actually have a little bit of money left over and are just choosing to spend it on random bullshit. That's certainly not everyone. Many people do truly live paycheck to paycheck, but I think that value is a little bit overblown. Now, at the same time, though, you should be able to afford a little bit of entertainment. You should be able to pay for Netflix and pay for, some extra stuff with your paychecks. You shouldn't be living in a world where every dollar has to go to bare necessity survival items and you have nothing left over. That is not a reality that I want anyone to endure. But then let's contrast this all to the 70s, our grandparents when they were growing up. When my grandmother was around my age, it was, 1960, 1970, something like that. And around half of the people in their 20s, they were able to move out. A lot of them were married. Like I said, my grandma had 3 kids and was married by the time she was 23. And of course, many of them found stable jobs where you could actually work at a company for your entire career and get a pension and not have to worry about job insecurity. And today, in our modern world with Gen Z and millennials and even Gen X, you could say, less than a quarter of people can say that. Most people are not able to have children. They don't believe that they can buy a house. They don't believe that they're going to have their job forever. My mom, right now, is dealing with worrying that maybe she's going to lose her job because of companies restructuring and constantly shuffling around people who are employed, and you don't know if you'll have your job in a few months or not. Nothing is stable anymore. And people always want to throw around the idea of, oh, well, but unemployment is low and the stock market is doing really well and the economy is booming. Fuck all that, dude. The economy is going up to your average person on the street and saying, how are you feeling about your job, about your life, about your lifestyle? Do you feel like you can afford things? Can you afford groceries? I just ran into my neighbor, funnily enough, yesterday, and he said that he has to move home back to his home state because both he and his wife just had their company lay them off because they can't afford it anymore and they had to fire them. This is the reality of people. You don't have to fucking look at all these statistics on a screen and whether or not these certain statistics are moving up and down. The economy is just people, and it's how people are feeling. It's really a vibe check in a certain way. If people believe that the economy is doing well, then more people are likely to invest and to spend their money and allow the economy to boom. But when all of these personal anecdotal things are happening, where people truly are struggling, that is the indication of how we are really doing. We don't care what the Federal Reserve is telling us that, oh, it's under control and unemployment is fine, don't worry about it. We don't care about that. Gen Z and millennials and the average working American doesn't give a shit about what the government is telling us if we don't believe that it's true. And when we are all living, on average, worse financially, than our grandparents did, that is an indication of a collapse of the whole cultural framework. The system is fundamentally failing if the 50th percentile earners cannot afford a basic lifestyle. And so when people say, oh, well, young people just don't want to work. They're lazy. They're just too busy buying all their Starbucks, right? It misses the point entirely. It's not that we don't want to work. Like I said, I work 6 or 7 days a week. My girlfriend stays very busy. It's just that the reward of that has shrunk. And a job by itself doesn't buy a house anymore. Like my day job, I earned like $50K a year. And it's like, oh, $50K, wow, that's not that bad. Yeah, but when you had to spend $120,000 just to get that job, then it's a bit of a fucking low bar. You have to put so much time and so many resources and so much money into this thing that is theoretically supposed to earn you that investment back. But if it takes 20, 30 years to pay it off and then you can start earning, what kind of life does that really afford you? These normal average jobs don't guarantee you healthcare like they used to. They don't guarantee you being more or less debt-free in a reasonable amount of time or being financially secure. You can lose your job on a dime, right? Pensions, they are so much less plentiful than they were when our grandparents were our age. If you don't know, pensions were basically, I mean, they're still around, but the idea is that you would be able to essentially be guaranteed some amount of regular income after you retire. In a very large way, the 401k has replaced the pension. And if you don't know what the 401k is, that is the most popular, pretty much, financial retirement vehicle where instead of getting a guaranteed income after you retire, you are just going to contribute to a fund your entire working career. And then once you retire, you can withdraw from that. And the whole point of it is that you're putting in your money that's pre-tax. And then when you take the money out, it's post-tax. But it's not as good as a pension because a lot of the times you didn't have to put any money into a pension. It was just a employee-sponsored thing that they were going to take care of you. And when you retired, you would just have this routine, regular income as part of your pension. That's not how a 401k works. It's not how Roth IRAs work. You contribute to it yourself. Some pensions you would have to contribute to, but it's literally just a nerfed version of what a pension used to be. And like I said, pensions are often not even sponsored with companies. They don't always give you that option. I wasn't given that option. And it sucks because that's just another disadvantage that Gen Z has to deal with. We simply are not often given the same tools that our grandparents were afforded. And there's no way that this all doesn't coalesce into a massive catalyst for a mental health crisis. If you are in your 20s right now, like me, I bet a lot of you guys feel behind. Like you're just late to the starting line, like, oh, goddamn, excuse me for being born in the 2000s, right? I guess I should have just been born in 1995 and put all my money in Amazon. Then I would have been okay, right? But the truth of the matter is that the race that we are all running has fundamentally changed. The milestones that your parents hit are not available anymore. They're not feasible to hit. You can't put yourself through college on just a waitressing job like my mom was able to do 30 years ago. I fundamentally could not afford to do that. I do want to make this point that I know it's not impossible nowadays. It's not impossible to buy a home. It's not that you just simply cannot ever afford to put yourself through college. It's not like it's $1 million to go to college. But the way that it used to be so much more accessible, and nowadays where it's out of pretty much everyone's reach to be able to put yourself through college or to get a home in a quick amount of time, that is the difference. The American dream, I don't believe is dead, but I think that it's dying, and it's not at all close to what it used to be. We are all playing a very different game nowadays where we can't just work at Denny's and that'll pay for law school. Or like my grandma having 3 kids and being able to have a home, and they paid for the home in like 9 months or something ridiculous, not 30 years, 9 months. That is not possible. That race of getting to that goal, that milestone, it's not on the track anymore, okay? You're not going to ever get there. Again, at least for the average person. Yes, there are some Nepo babies that are going to be able to buy a home and they'll be fine. I'm not talking about rich kids. I'm talking about normal working people where the average 50th percentile earner can simply not afford what used to be affordable. And it's all exacerbated so much by social media. And I mention social media a lot, and it's a very tired point that I, constantly harp on, but it's true, man. When you are simultaneously confronted with the fact that you can't afford a home in the same amount of time that your parents were able to do it, and then you couple that with seeing other rich kids on Instagram flaunting that they can buy a home already, that's gonna give you some amount of shame and that you're behind and that you're lazy or dumb or why can they do it and I can't do it? The truth is that these people are not any smarter than you. They were just simply born in a good part of the map. They got good RNG. And I understand that I got some good RNG. I mean, the fact that I'm just a straight white dude that was born in America to a reasonably affluent household is a huge advantage, and I can't discount that. Many of us were given advantages that we don't even notice half the time, and you have to acknowledge that, because I don't want to poverty cosplay here. I know that I've been given some amount of privilege. Just by the fact of being able to talk about this to a microphone on a YouTube channel shows that I do have some amount of privilege. But the point that I'm making is that this is not ever going to be, at this point, a political issue. It's not a race issue. It is a class issue. It is the 99% of us against the 1%. The people that are able to earn $600,000 a year and they can put 200 grand of that into the stock market are always going to outpace you if you're just working at Lowe's for 20 grand a year. People try to paint this narrative that it's red versus blue, black versus white. It is not that. At this point, it is about class, and it is about the elites versus the commoners. And I want people to get rid of this shame that it's somehow your fault that you're behind. A lot of us at this point, we're just like, excuse me for not being born into a billionaire's family. It's a very fine line between playing the victim and accepting that, oh, I'm just never going to succeed, while also acknowledging that there are some pretty fundamental bad RNG that is at play here, and you can't fault yourself for that. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't try, because look at me. I'm trying right now. I do an entrepreneurial type job for a living, and I know that I don't want to stay in that corporate 9-to-5 forever, where it's never gonna, my goals are never gonna hit. But at the same time, I want to acknowledge that there are certain things that are just simply not your fault. It's not your fault that inflation and the cost of living is out of control. It's good to recognize that and recognize the problems that are on your doorstep so you know how to best deal with them going forward. But at the same time, while we're on the topic of privilege, let's acknowledge that the American dream, to a certain extent, was actually quite selective. And it's not as though literally everyone could do it. I do get that you're going to hear some story about, oh, my grandfather from Slovenia came here in the 30s and was able to start a laundromat and become successful. And that's the American dream. Like, that happened for a lot of people. But it doesn't mean that literally every American was just given some silver platter and that everyone had a home and it was so easy. It's not the truth. When my grandmother was my age, she wasn't even allowed to have a bank account unless she was married. Like, it wasn't honestly that recent that women weren't even allowed to vote back then, or that a lot of the times black people just couldn't do things. They were not able to go into the same restaurants as people, and they weren't handed the same opportunities that white people were. And I think that's why so many of us are stuck, because we're still stuck in that mindset that the problems of today of wealth inequality are the product of a race issue or a political issue. You see that today in the UK, where so much of the country's turmoil is blamed on immigrants, and that it's all about the immigration. My ass it is, dude. It is about the billionaires and the people earning $20 million a year that can invest all their money passively and outclass everyone. It's not about race. Don't give me that shit. It's not about politics or who you identify as. It's about class and your wealth. I hope no one believes this bullshit argument that we're fed, that it's somehow immigrants' fault or it's about, black versus white. It's not about that at all. It's about the fact that middle-class families cannot get the American dream like they used to. So, where does that leave us then, huh? Where would you say the American dream is? Because I think that you can make the argument that it is dead and that we're just pretending that it still exists. That, oh, well, you can just start an Etsy shop. You can start a Shopify business and become a YouTuber and you can still make it. Yes, you can do that, but the average person is not going to want to work 90 hours a week after their day job and do that. You did not have to work 80, 90 hours a week 70 years ago to make a reasonable lifestyle for yourself. So I think what's really happening is that the definition of the dream is just changing. The old dream was about ownership. You could own a home, own a car without debt. You could own stability in a way, just have fundamental stability in your life. And the new dream, as sad as it is, might have to be about something smaller, but maybe it's a little bit more personal. Where rather than saying that the American dream is owning a home, you could say, well, at least I own my schedule. I'm going to go out and start a business, and I might not have the income to buy a $500,000 home in 2 years, but at least I can go on a walk and I can enjoy my lifestyle. I can, have small things in my day where maybe I'm not being owned by a corporation. I'm choosing to go out and live my own life, whether that looks like living in a van or whatever. I'm not saying that the American dream is just be homeless, because that's obviously depressing. But what I am saying is that maybe you just have to find a new way to define it. For me, I grapple with this a lot because to other people, it could be easily construed that I should be living the dream. I'm able to talk to a microphone for a living, and I can pay my bills doing that. I can wake up when I want to, and that should be the dream lifestyle. And in a lot of ways, it is. And I could argue that I am living that American dream. I don't have the home and the status symbols that used to be associated with it. And eventually, I hope that I will get those. But we might have to readjust the milestones a little bit. But at the same time, it does not mean that the economic pain of everything is not real. Inequality is not just a number. It's not just a statistic on a screen. It's real people. It shapes how we live, this inequality. When you see billionaires buying literally rockets, like going into orbit for fun, while you can't afford your rent, it's going to eat away at your sense of fairness and being like, what the fuck is this? When you realize that you might never own a home, it does make you question, like, well, why am I even doing this? What's the point of it all? And that gap between expectations and reality is where hopelessness is going to fester. And it's where I think this mental health crisis is going to come from, if it's not already here. People are going to start to think, well, why am I even waking up in the morning and working for this company if it's just going to treat me like dog shit and I can't buy the things that I want to buy, or even the things that I need to buy? Like, some people can't even afford their rent, or they can't afford between, am I going to pay for auto insurance this month or groceries for the 4th month of the week? Some people have to make those hard decisions, and that's really tough. But again, hopelessness and worrying about the future doesn't have to be the end conclusion, because like I said, you can accept that maybe the old dream of the American dream is dead. The ability to buy a home at 22 years old with a factory job is dead. That does not exist anymore. And you can stop punishing yourself for not living up to that expectation, because it's just mathematically not possible. You can stop measuring your life against milestones that no longer exist. You can start asking different questions. Like, instead of saying, why don't I have a house yet? Maybe, what kind of life feels meaningful to me with what I have? And again, I know it's a very slippery slope into the whole you will own nothing and be happy bullshit that the World Economic Forum is trying to push. I do not believe in that at all. But I am saying you kind of have to meet your life where it is. I saw some number, I'm pretty sure that the average Gen Z thinks that to be rich and successful, they have to be earning like $520,000 a year or something ridiculous. Maybe you have to confront the fact that reality is not going to give you that. And I mean, I'm not saying that's impossible to get, but for the average person to get $500,000 a year is pretty unrealistic. And you have to meet yourself with where you are right now. Maybe that means redefining stability a little bit. Like, instead of your stability being focused around a mortgage, it's about finding people that you trust and you confide in, and community. And maybe instead of having some lifelong career where it's a huge status symbol, you should look into developing skills that you can take across jobs and you can invest in yourself. If you have the ability to teach yourself how to do things and enjoy your hobbies and work out and go on walks, that is still a very beautiful life. And it doesn't have to all be about chasing the luxury of a nice car or the perfect career. I think where people get tripped up and where it becomes a very emotional, tough argument is because mostly when it comes to a home, that is a necessity. People need a place to live. They cannot just rent for their entire lives, otherwise they're going to be poor forever. And so it's really tough to just say, be happy with what you got. Suck it up. You're not going to own a home, because a home is pretty much the most fundamental thing you need, is shelter. And I get it. I want a home just as badly as you do, dude. I'm just saying that it's going to take more work than it used to. And these things about focusing more on community and focusing on your hobbies and your skills, whatever, it's not going to be as glamorous, right? Owning a really nice car and a nice house is such a status symbol. And I get that people flaunt that kind of thing on social media. But I'm telling you, man, you just have to look past that somehow. You have to meet your life where it is. I want to touch on the idea of living paycheck to paycheck, because while I do get that many people probably truly are left with no dollars at all after all their expenses, or they're even left in the negative. At the same time, I think a lot of people are being quite ridiculous. I think some of you guys probably know about Caleb Hammer with Financial Audit on YouTube. It's a show where he brings people on and just kind of rips them apart financially and hopefully comes across as a productive conversation about money. But so many people come on the show and they're like, well, I only make about $2,600 a paycheck, but I really want to keep leasing my $1,000 a month car. Or, I hear you, Caleb. I really want to start saving money, but those Disney annual passes, man, I can't live without that. Like, come on, bro. Shut the fuck up. That is not actually true. You can cut back, and I think a lot of people can cut back more than they probably realize. Like saving a little bit of money, even if it's just $20 a week, that can build a cushion. And it's not going to amount to much in a short amount of time, but just building a small habit can make your future life maybe a little bit more prosperous. If you build the habit that you are someone that just spends money on random things and doesn't care about budgeting or thinking about where their life is going, then you're not setting yourself up for success. It's not just about the raw amount of money you can save. It's about building a habit that you can find a way out and that you can grow to a more stable position in life. I've had this mentality ever since I started my day job when I graduated college, and I knew that I wanted more out of life. And I was building the habit of saying, no matter what, pretty much every day I'm going to work on YouTube or something. In the beginning, it wasn't even YouTube. It's just like random internet businesses I was trying to start. I'm going to put in the effort every day and build that habit, because you have to. You have to be that consistent if you want to get anywhere in life. And when it comes to money, maybe it means learning a little bit about investments and where to put your money, and index funds or bonds or high yield savings accounts. Even just at a basic level, putting in a small amount of effort every day is an act of defiance against a system, saying, I am not going to accept this reality. I am going to try to make something more for myself. But at the same time, I don't want to give people false hope and say that literally everyone can succeed, because as tough as it is to say, it's not true. Not everyone can or will succeed. For there to be people that have won the game, some people have to have lost. You cannot have winners without losers. I am just talking to the people that know that they've got that fire in them and they want to make more out of their life, because you know that you can be a winner. There are some people that are just fundamentally screwed. They were just born into the worst possible circumstances, and unfortunately, they're probably never going to make it out. I'm hoping that that is not you, and by token of you being able to listen to this video, I'm willing to assume that you probably have some advantages that you don't know you have yet. But of course, I do want to acknowledge that personal responsibility and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps can only go so far. You can't budget your way out of systemic inequality. You can't just stop buying avocado toasts and then you can finally buy a home. It's not going to work that way. But I am saying that the small moves do matter, and those small habits can give you some sense of agency. And agency, in a way, is the antidote to despair and hopelessness and never making it out. If the system is not going to hand you the dream like it used to 70 years ago, then you have to start carving it out for yourself if you want it. It's not going to look like your parents' or grandparents' life, but that's okay. And maybe it's better to build something more authentic and to say, despite all of the circumstances, I was still able to make it out. Maybe that's better than chasing a template that was never built for us in the first place. And I think about this sometimes too, where time is wealth in its own way. You can be broke and struggling financially, but still be rich in other ways. I remember I watched a video of this guy that was comparing the lifestyle of like a pizza delivery driver and like a day trader. And the day trader was making like $7,000 a day, while the pizza delivery man was making like $50 a day. I don't know, something like that. Maybe it's a little bit of cope, but the pizza delivery guy seemed pretty happy, and he would be able to come home after work and hang out with his family, and in a way seemed like he genuinely liked his life. He might have been broke from the outside, but maybe money isn't everything, and having time and spending it in a way that you want is its own form of wealth. And conversely, you can be loaded and still be bankrupt if you feel like your life is just consumed by work that you hate. Like if you're an investment banker and you're working 100 hours a week at some company that you don't like, then what's the point, bro? There's no point of having money if you can't spend it in ways that you want. And there's certainly no point in a life if you can't spend the time how you want, if you're just chained to a desk forever. I don't think that's any way to live. The old dream was all about money, saying that money was the key to happiness. Because I feel like back in the 70s and 80s, everyone was saying, oh, money doesn't buy happiness. And, there's more to life than money. But they were the beneficiaries of having tons of money to work with and having more financial security. And I've seen nowadays where people say that they push back more on the idea that money doesn't buy happiness, because it does in a way. Money might not buy happiness directly, but poverty certainly does not buy happiness. And people are pushing back on that idea because they're realizing that all of these people that used to say that money is not going to make you any happier are the people that are directly benefiting from having those advantages. It's very easy to say that when you're sitting in your ivory tower and enjoying all the fruits of a system that benefited you. You don't see Gen Z saying money doesn't buy happiness because we're not enjoying those benefits in the same way. But at the same time, maybe this new reality has to say that happiness is going to come from ways that are separate from money, and being able to live your life in a way that satisfies you even when money is not as plentiful as you wish it was. It sucks and it's unfair, and I'm not saying that you should just be happy if you're struggling to pay your bills. Just suck it up. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying try to find joy in the little moments, because life is hard. And it's a lot easier to deal with your life when you're not just angry at everything. And here's the thing, man. Resentment is not going to build anything. You can be angry at boomers because they stole the American dream from you, and they have systematically dismantled every single advantage that Gen Z could benefit from. Yeah, I get it. But it's not that staying stuck there is going to make the dream come back to life. The only way forward is to reimagine what your dream could look like. Maybe the American dream is not about owning a home. Like I said, it's not going to be in the same way. It's about finding other ways to define it. And it's not glamorous to say that. It's not going to be as fun. But being resentful and bitter about it is not going to do anything for you. Just being angry silently is not the path to success. It's using that anger as fuel to build something more. So I want to close this out by saying that I don't think that the American dream is dead, but I do think that Gen Z is starting to not believe that it's possible. And I get it. It's very frustrating. I feel very financially stressed and that I'm never going to make it, and I empathize with those concerns. But maybe the question should be, what dream are we going to build instead? Because if we keep trying to chase the old system, we're always going to feel like failures. You're never going to achieve what our grandparents achieved in the same period of time. But if we start redefining what a life could look like, a life worth living, maybe we'll find something better than the dream that we were promised. Something that is actually tangible and more human, and maybe actually worth chasing.